I don't know. I honestly, what I do know without a shadow of a doubt is that neither Dylan or Victor
But you don't know
would
that.
do anything. I do
You
know
don't know
that. I know that. What on earth? What reason on God's green earth would they have to do this?
But you know
None.
what?
That's not even possible. They couldn't even like
Joe,
punch someone.
I have a problem, Joe. Because the whole time I sat in here and talked with you, I have yet to hear you say you wouldn't do it.
The case that I have for you guys today could literally be the scenario of an escape room. Okay, so you have to imagine yourself being trapped inside the guest room of this beautiful 3-story townhouse. And as you look around, you notice that there is a 32-year-old man lying in the bed. He is neatly tucked into bed. You get closer. His hair is still damp, as if he just took a shower. Nothing seems to be out of the ordinary about this man. He looks like he's peacefully asleep, except that you notice that he is pale white and he is dead. And so you decide to go a little bit closer. And then you lift up his shirt and you find 3 perfectly placed, almost surgical stab wounds in his chest. And the odd thing here is the shirt itself is not damaged and there's almost no blood anywhere. And so you move the body and then you notice these injection sites, as if someone had used a syringe and injected something into him. And there are several of these sites, so it just leads you to believe that he might have been incapacitated with some type of paralyzing agent. And so you continue looking, you move the body to the side, and you notice that there is blood underneath him pooling around his torso area. And then suddenly, 3 of his housemates enters the room. They tell you that he was only a guest here and they have no idea what had happened. And then a detective pushes past these 3 men, giving them all a skeptical look before turning to you and tells you something that sounds absolutely absurd. So he informs you that the medical examiner found semen on the sheets, on the victim's genitals, and on his abdomen, and they found some on the anus and inside the rectum. And I'm not going to mimic inside the rectum. So clearly, this has to be SA, right? You tell the detective this, but you didn't let the detective finish. Okay? He continues to tell you that the semen belonged to the victim himself. So if this was a real escape room, you and that detective would be trapped in there for the next 19 years. This is the murder of Robert Wone, which has stumped DC detectives, armchair detectives, forensic experts, you name it. We'd all be stuck in this room for the past 20 years. Now, if there was ever a case that could be described as bizarre, it would be this one. And as for now, hopefully you will find a little intrigue in hitting that like button. And once you've heard the story of Robert Wone, hey, please share some theories in the comment section. It'll help the algorithm. It'll help the channel. And I will share my own little theory at the end of this video. So Robert Wone, he was born on June 1st of 1974 in Manhattan. His father is named Bill, an IT executive at Chase Bank, and his mother, Amy, was a librarian. Now, Robert, from what I could find, is a wonderful child, and from the moment that he could speak, there was just this loving nature, about this kid. Now, being the eldest son of a proud Chinese-American family, he had a lot of weight on his shoulders, and a lot of that weight was focused on education. And let's just say that Robert got the memo. So here's a quick story, okay, to get you an idea about what kind of kid Robert actually was. So for Halloween, he didn't want to be a ghost. He didn't want to be Spider-Man. He dressed up as a Revolutionary War soldier. And let's face it, nothing says American history like a Chinese kid dressed to shoot the redcoats. Am I right? So Robert was always a straight A student, from his time at St. Edmund's Elementary to being the Xaverian High School valedictorian. So he was always the teacher's favorite, the teacher's pet. And so when it was time to go to college, he would choose the College of William and Mary, in which in '96 he would graduate as a top merit scholar. Now here's another great window into Robert's personality, okay? So his peers in college voted him the nicest human on earth. And he got an award for that. So who wouldn't love to hang out with the extremely smart, extremely nice guy? He would then go on to Pennsylvania Law School and graduate in 99 with honors. So after all this success in schooling, once he graduated, any firm would have loved to have a mind like Robert's and a great personality to boot on their team. So after a few preliminary gigs, in that field, he would finally land the big one. Okay, one of the country's most elite law firms, Washington, D.C.'s Covington and Burling. The name alone sounds like a lawsuit. And Robert did have a pretty active social life, okay? Like most young men, and I could attest to this, we're just hanging out at the American Bar Association conference, And in 2002, he met a young woman named Kathy Yu, and they liked each other. They liked each other so much that they were willing to give long distance a try because Kathy, well, she lived all the way in Chicago. Well, as they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and apparently for these two, so does distance. And it only intensified their need to be together, so after just a year of doing the long distance thing, Robert got down on his knee and he proposed to Kathy. This would happen in June of 2003. And so their marriage would appropriately be officiated by an actual judge, one of Robert's old bosses. One of their friends described their marriage and relationship as disgustingly happy because they would write each other these daily love emails down to scheduling dates at the gym. So now you basically had a beautiful couple, a happy couple, and a healthy couple as well. Disgusting. And so the two eventually agreed upon a nice place to settle, and that would be in Oakton, Virginia. I mean, Robert's own parents, who lived in New York, they moved all the way down to be next to them in 2006. For Robert and Kathy, things were really shaping up to be a wonderful life. And it would only get better because it turns out that working for Covington and Burling wasn't Robert's endgame. Okay, that would come in June of 2006 when he was offered the gig of general counsel for Radio Free Asia. So Covington and Burling is considered big law. Okay, it's in the private sector, and the job at Radio Free Asia is considered the public sector, the more non-profit law. Now, if you're scratching your head because it sounds like a lot less money, then you would be exactly right. He took a significant pay cut to work at Radio Free Asia. So he was netting north of $300,000, including bonuses, at Covington, while at Radio Free Asia, he was offered $135,000. And if you really need more proof of the depth of this man's character, look no further than just that. Right? So he was using his skills to defend press freedom and get uncensored news into places like China and North Korea. A worthwhile venture, but something that was not very good for his wallet, but something very good for his soul. However, there is another drawback at working for Radio Free Asia, and that was now he had even longer hours and a less predictable work schedule. And it was for this exact reason that we actually have a case to talk about today. So basically a gift and a curse for Robert Wone. So one night while working for Radio Free Asia, Robert was just powering through on coffee or whatever he took to stay awake. Okay, another marathon day, and he was completely exhausted. And as much as he would have liked to be, in his nice cozy bed with Kathy, the hour-long commute back home did not seem like something he could have did that night. But there was another option though. He did know someone in the DC area, and that would be a man named Joseph Price. Now these two, they met when they attended the College of William and Mary. When Robert was coming in as a freshman, Joseph was already a senior, and he basically took Robert under his wing. And they were both heavily involved in student government, and both were in what was called the 13 Club. And that was kind of a secret society that would perform random acts of kindness, such as leaving encouraging notes, for fellow students who looked like they were struggling, to just sending flowers to students to brighten up their day, or something simple like handing out snacks in the library for those that were really, burning the midnight oil. And Robert would tell you himself that he really looked up to Joseph, who was like a mentor to him, a campus big brother that made Robert's time in college unforgettable. Robert once joked to his wife Kathy that if the College of William and Mary was an actual person, he might have to have a love affair with the school. So now we can add strange sense of humor to the nicest man on earth. And even after college, the two kept in touch. Joseph would host Robert's 30th birthday party and even attended the wedding. Throughout the years, Robert and Kathy would attend dinner parties at Joseph's house, and they would even meet Joseph's partner, Victor Zaborski, and their roommate, a man named Dylan Ward. And the many times that Kathy couldn't make it, Robert would attend several dinner parties, game nights, or just holidays at Joseph's house as well. But, and this is an important but, he never stayed overnight until this night. And I was telling you about how exhausted Robert was. This was a pre-planned overnight stay, okay? Because earlier in the week, when Robert received his work schedule, he looked at Wednesday and it stuck out like a sore thumb. He was scheduled to work until about 10 p.m. that night. And remember, he has an hour-long commute home after that. So he showed Kathy his schedule, and they both agreed that the hour-long commute home after a grueling day of work might not be the best option, okay? So that's when Robert sent a text out to his old buddy, Joseph Price. Mind if I crash at your place Wednesday? Where Joseph Price immediately texts back, of course, the guest room is all yours. So when Wednesday night rolled around, he got off work around 10-ish, and around 10:30 p.m., he was rolling up to that immaculate 3-story townhouse that he has been to, countless times. And his buddy, Joseph Price, met him at the door with a warm smile. And inside, Robert greeted his boyfriend, Victor Zaborski, and also his roommate, Dylan Ward. I'll tell you now that these three men, they are all gay. And within this household, it is now revealed that they were having some type of polyamorous, that's how it was worded, polyamorous triple, meaning they were all sleeping together, but not exactly. And we'll have to touch on that later in the story. And so after a quick tour, this is your room, this is where you will be showering, Robert and Joseph find themselves in the kitchen, where Joseph gets Robert a glass of water and they chit-chat for the next 20 minutes before Robert turns in. Okay, so Robert goes and takes a shower. He changed and headed to the second floor guest room. Now, the housemates said that they all turned in as well. Joe and Victor, upstairs in the master bedroom. And then Dylan would knock himself out by taking some sleeping pills, Ambient. And at 11:08 p.m., Robert's laptop pinged what would turn out to be the last, I guess you could say, digital sign of life. Within the next 40 minutes of that ping would be 40 minutes that no one has ever been able to explain.
DC Emergency 911 operator 6752. Do you need police, fire, or ambulance?
Immediately, we need an ambulance.
What's wrong, ma'am?
We had someone that was in our house, evidently, and they stabbed somebody.
Okay, somebody's inside the house now?
I don't know, we heard.
Are they bleeding? You see someone bleeding?
Someone is bleeding in our house.
Okay, where's they bleeding from?
I think in the stomach.
In the stomach? Is he conscious? Calm down for me. I'm going to send some help, okay? Female or male?
It's a male. He's a friend of ours. He was spending the night with us.
Okay, and who was the person that stabbed him? Do you know? Is he conscious?
We need an ambulance.
Ma'am, listen to me.
He's not conscious.
He's not conscious at all?
No. We need someone right now.
Is he breathing? Listen to me. Calm down. I'm going to help you, okay? Is he breathing?
I'm upstairs, and he's downstairs. I don't know.
Okay, who's downstairs with him?
My partner is downstairs with him right now. He told me to go upstairs and call the police immediately. I just went to the stairs and
Okay, who's the person? Okay, I'm sending paramedics and the police. Okay, who's the person that stabbed him?
I don't know. We think it's somebody with an intruder in the house. We heard the chime at the door.
And shortly after, the neighborhood would be awakened as sirens screamed toward Swan Street. Now, paramedics would burst through the door at about 11:54 p.m. and they just completely froze when they got to the guest room. And you really couldn't blame them. Robert lay perfectly arranged on the bed, head on the pillow, arms at his side, dressed in a fresh t-shirt and shorts. Now, if it wasn't a crime scene, it would almost be serene. Okay, except for those precise stab wounds clustered in this tidy 2x2-inch patch on his chest. Now, one had sliced directly through his heart, yet the sheets beneath him held most of the blood, and the t-shirt he is currently wearing is definitely not the shirt he was wearing when these wounds occurred. The scene is just baffling. No blood splatter. There's no signs of a struggle, no defensive marks on the victim, a seemingly peaceful yet abrupt end to this man's life. So going back to when paramedics first entered the house, okay, when they were greeted by these three characters, the housemates, what greeted them was later described by multiple officers as the calmest murder scene they've ever walked into. Okay, so you had Joseph Price, and he simply stood there, barefoot, in a white robe, arms folded, coolly answering questions. And then you had Victor Zaborski, who was the only one that seemed to have been crying. He was able to gather himself once officers and EMTs entered the house. And then you have this third fella named Dylan Ward, and he's barefoot, and he's shirtless, and he just stood there silently in the living room, just staring at the floor or staring into space. What a few of the officers and EMTs noticed as well was the silence. Okay, no one was asking if Robert was going to be okay, and no one even needed any updates. One paramedic went as far as to say that it felt like the three roommates were reading from the same script. Now, if you are envisioning the guest room that Robert was in as appearing staged, then you're definitely not alone, because many, if not all, the police officers and EMTs that day, they felt the same way.
Robert is laying there. The bed cover is pulled back. He's laying there. There is blood on him. His hand was out, like one arm was out like this and one arm was like this, I think, or somewhere across his body. And there was a knife. I believe it was laying on him, on his stomach or something like that. I picked up the knife, I moved it, I lifted up his shirt, and I could clearly see there was one, puncture wound right on his belly. I lifted up his shirt a little more, there was a lot of blood on his chest. Before I touched Robert, Victor became very hysterical, and I yelled at him to go call 911. Just go do that. He ran upstairs. He got the phone. He came back down or whatever. Was on the phone with them. He handed me a towel.
Listen to what your theory is. Listen to your theory. A person comes in, gets a knife, tiptoes upstairs. Boom, boom, boom.
I think
Tiptoes
somebody
downstairs
came in
and out
our house
to kill
looking
him.
to steal something.
But they didn't steal
You had a
anything.
computer-
You don't have to
you had a
go upstairs to
computer
steal
right downstairs.
anything.
You know what? They went into a room that's on the front of the house, probably thinking, there's nobody here, whatever. They're going to check the place out, find what they want, and
That's not how it works.
they get surprised. They run into somebody who's sleeping on the pull-out
I was in
sofa.
the I did burglaries for a while. You want me to tell you what a burglary normally do?
No, I don't.
When they see
I have
somebody,
interviewed
they
burglars
go
too.
out.
You know what burglars normally do? They normally start from the bottom floor first, and they pack everything in a bag, and they sit it by the door. Then they work their way up. They don't go canvass the house first. That's not what they do.
As soon as they find somebody, they run.
As soon as they find somebody, they run, and you know what? The bag is right by the door, so they can take the bag and run with it.
And they ain't gonna leave no knife behind.
And they ain't gonna leave no knife behind. That's what burglars do.
Joseph Price admitted to the police that he had moved Robert's body when he had found him and had removed the knife from his chest himself. And this would be an issue, and we're about to find out why. So there are 3 extraordinarily neat stab wounds to Robert's chest, right? And one piercing the heart so precisely that the medical examiner said that it was surgical. 0 defense wounds on Robert's hands and arms, and those tiny, unexplained puncture marks on his neck, chest, hands, and foot. And they were described by the medical examiner as being consistent with prime sites for paralysis injection. Now, Robert's body appears to have been freshly showered, and his hair was actually still damp when the EMTs arrived. Now, he was wearing pajamas. I have to put in quote, pajamas, because when we think about pajamas, we think about those fuzzy 2 pieces, long sleeves or whatnot, but they were just a t-shirt and shorts. And Robert's wife, Kathy, when she had to identify, Robert, she said she did not recognize this apparel. Also on the crime scene, there was a knife just laying on the nightstand, and it had blood on it. So obviously, the murder weapon, right? But wrong. The blade was way too wide for the wounds inflicted. However, there is blood on it that would turn out to be Robert's blood. But besides that, the manner in which the blood sat on the blade itself indicated that it was smeared onto the blade and then wiped away, which appeared, to have been left there as a staging attempt. Now, 1 knife was missing from the kitchen, and it was a set that belonged to Dylan Ward, this high-end set called Wusthof set. And the knife itself was described as this thin as a scalpel kind of knife that would perfectly match the 3 stabs. There was also a faint bleach smell in the air and a chemical cleaning smell. Now, don't forget, this is midnight, and the washing machine downstairs was running. Now, all the housemates said that they had all gone to bed. So why is the washing machine still running at midnight, right? And inside, they would find towels and bedding. The back door patio itself also appeared to have been just hosed down. Now, once the forensic team got to the house, their luminol later revealed that there was blood wiped from the guest room floor, as well as the hallway, the shower drain, and the washer and dryer. No, not the dryer. No, just the washer. Then the police would seize some items that would really reveal some, I don't want to say degenerate kind of behavior, but some kinky behavior within that household. And one of those things was an electro-stimulation device. They found some restraints and other, BDSM gadgets. They would find these things in the master bedroom and as well as Dylan's room. And of course, that one disturbing find that puzzles everybody up until this day, and that was finding Robert's own semen inside his rectum and on his abdomen. Now, it gets even more odd if we want to get into specifics, but it should help if you actually are trying to figure out this case. But the semen is actually just the fluid that sperm swims in. They were not able to find any sperm cells in that seminal fluid, and doctors believe that it had been extracted, not ejaculated. No trauma, no bruising, no foreign DNA. Now, I found a rather disturbing fact that not many places wrote about, and that was the fact that Robert was actually considered alive still, when EMTs wheeled him out of that house, but barely alive, okay? Now, whether he was still conscious, if his brain was still working, we do not know. Robert Wone was actually pronounced dead at 24 minutes past midnight, which would be about 30 minutes from when EMT came into that house. And he was pronounced dead at George Washington University Hospital on August 3rd of 2006. And so, the three men, the three housemates inside that house, insisted that it was an intruder, okay? This intruder scaled this 8-foot wall, that back fence of theirs, disarmed the security, and then he slipped through an unlocked back door, paralyzed Robert on the one singular night that he was staying there, SA'd him, stabbed him 3 times with surgical precision, showered him, redressed him, cleaned the scene, and then vanished. All within 40 minutes, all without waking Dylan Ward, who was just a mere 20 feet away. So let me go ahead and tell you guys just a little bit more about each of the 3 housemates from that night. And of course, we're going to start with Joseph Price. Now, he is a lawyer, just like Robert was, and he was a partner at the firm called Errant Fox. Now, he is considered commanding, yet also very charismatic, okay? The undisputed leader of that household. Anyone who came across him that night said that he did almost all the talking, okay? And it was all done in a manner that was calm and lawyer-like. And then you had his live-in partner, Victor Zaborski, who is a senior marketing manager at Milk Pep, and that's the same group behind the Got Milk ads. And if you heard the 911 call, then you could see that he was clearly emotional. And when help arrived, they clearly saw that his face was still marked with tear stains, although he was already dry-eyed and composed in person. And then you would have Dylan Ward, a massage therapist and a part-time model. Now, there were a lot of misconceptions on Dylan Ward, and I fact-checked to make sure I got this correct. I still don't know if I got it correct. There's just so many sources out there and so many twists that they've done with this character of Dylan Ward. At one instance, they said that he comes from a rich family. He's somewhat of a wanderer, just living off his parents' money or whatnot. But when I dug in, that wasn't the case. He came from a middle-class family. He wasn't poor, but he was far from rich as well. During that night, like I described to you before, he was kind of zombie-like. He barely spoke, stared at the floor, and he told the police that he took an Ambien to fall asleep, which knocked him out cold until, he was awakened sober with all the commotion. And anything that was said that night, that would be the extent of what you were going to get out of these 3, because they all lawyered up within hours, and all with top-tier criminal defense attorneys. And they never gave a major statement after that. The case would remain open and unsolved and slowly growing cold. And so we're going to jump a couple of years to 2008, and Joe Price, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward, well, they would get slapped with a conspiracy, obstruction, and tampering charges for the death of Robert Wone. And it really felt like justice was finally going to be served. And at the trial in 2010, Judge Lynn Leibowitz tears into all 3 of the men. She had no mercy. And one of her more dramatic statements to the men was saying, "I'm convinced you're hiding something." Now, we could only imagine how tense, that courtroom was awaiting justice for Robert. But there is a plot twist here, and it almost feels like a sick joke. The judge, who had all these awful things to say about the 3 men, she acquitted all of them. So why? Would be the next logical question, right? So she felt that the evidence, it did scream foul play. Foul play by the very men in that court, and not some outside force that they were saying, but it was all circumstantial. Not enough to stick those charges. So now we have to fast forward to 2011, okay? Now Kathy Wone, right? She's a widow now. She files a civil wrongful death suit. And needless to say, tensions, rockets, emotions boil up all over again. Will justice finally hit for Robert Wone? Nope. It's reported that the case settles out of court for an undisclosed amount, where people are thinking millions. And the 3 men, they don't have to admit a thing, and then life moves on. Crickets. So 19 years since Robert Wone lost his life, right? We're here, November 2025, and the true crime community is still seething over a complete disaster of a case. There is really no justice for Robert Wone still till this day. And those three, in my opinion, they know what went down that night. Yet they stroll around as free as birds, right? Now, this case was national news. I'm sure it made international news as well. And I guess Joseph Price decided that his name was marred, which it was. Okay, so he legally changes his name to Joseph Anderson, from what I could find. And him and Victor Zaborski purchased a home together in Miami Shores, Florida. Now, in 2008, they permanently relocated to Miami Shores after the trial/settlement. As of the most recent information that I could find about them, which is 2023, I believe, they have no longer any ties to Washington, D.C. and are still in Miami Shores. Now, let's go ahead and move to Dylan Ward. And he too felt like his name was smeared, and he would legally change his name to Dylan Thomas. Now, I will say that in this big country of ours, there are a lot of places to live, a lot of great places to live, other than Florida. But it is kind of bizarre that he too changes, his place of residence, and he too decides to move to Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, if we want to be exact, which is about a 30-minute drive to Miami Shores. Cowinkadink, right? It also says that Ward has since gotten married and is now a Pilates instructor and still remains a massage therapist. So I will say, in my opinion, I don't buy any of this for a second. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys don't buy it as well. I think they still have their little kink sessions, because I can't imagine it being that easy to find another person with the same kinks that you do, right? Why still open up the apps when you already know somebody that likes exactly the same disgusting stuff that you like? Gay BDSM is not something you can easily look up and just find, I assume. I could be wrong. I've been married for the past 6 years. I don't have those apps. And hey, if you've gotten this far in the video, I'd sure appreciate that thumbs up about now. I've added one Patreon member and one YouTube member in the past month. I'm excited to give you guys more exclusive content, and that's heading your way very soon. This whole thing is clearly staged, a poor cover-up at that, just like that judge assumed, but she has to go by the letter of the law. But we don't have to around here. We can give our exact opinion, okay? And for me, it was when Joseph Price told the police that he had moved Robert's body. That sounded like an attempt to get ahead of the story, get ahead of the detectives, just in case they were able to prove that he did have contact with that and incapacitated Robert. And we already know that the knife that was on the nightstand couldn't possibly be the same knife that made those puncture wounds. And Joseph said that he had removed it, which leads me to believe that in that state, okay, Joseph didn't know what to do. They got rid of the actual knife, which would have had all types of fingerprints on it. They weren't sure if their cleaning detail would, get rid of it. And so they got another knife, not thinking about size and width. So, right off the bat, Joseph is caught lying. Nothing from that point on should be believed. So, let's first break down the dynamic of this household and what we can gather, from that. So Joseph and Victor, they are definitely in a relationship. Dylan is basically Joseph's side piece that he fools around with, with all that BDSM stuff. And as mentioned, they were described as having this polyamorous throuple. Hey. This is what having a good wife does for you. They bring you a drink and remind you to take a break. So knowing the dynamic of this relationship, I personally will rule out Victor as participating in Robert Wone's murder on this simple fact that it was Victor that called the police. And here's why, okay? According to Victor himself, it was Joseph Price that found the body. So in my head is, he should have called the police. He shouldn't waste time going to tell everybody else. He should already be on the phone as he's telling everybody else what is happening. Any one of us to find our good friend in that condition, we are going to call the police ourselves. And I believe that the actual killer never wants to be the one to call it in, if they could help it, of course. To let someone else call who is actually in shock, like Victor was, will sell the story much more easily, okay? More than a guilty person attempting to act shocked, right? So the same thing happened in the John Benet Ramsey case when John made Patsy call the police. But that's just my theory. Just to check off a few more evidence, the police found no footprints in the backyard, even though it was a damp night. The latch on the back gate, it seemed to be undisturbed, and they figured that out somehow, right? And of course, nothing was stolen. So Joseph is described by numerous sources as pretty much being the alpha of the three men, the leader of the pack. And he clearly is showing signs of being the mastermind behind whatever the fuck this was that happened to Robert. Whether he caused it or not, it appeared that Joseph took control of the situation. And truth be told, he did not do a great job. And let's get into my personal scenario. Okay, so Robert Wone shows up at the house, okay? He chit-chats with Joseph and then heads off to take a shower in the hallway bathroom, which is directly adjacent to Dylan Ward's room. Now, Robert's last sign of life was when he sent out 2 emails, okay? One was to his wife, Kathy, just to explain the night at 11:05, and 2 minutes later, an email to his colleagues at Radio Free Asia. Business stuff, right? And this was all done from his BlackBerry, and it was all time-stamped. Now you have Robert, after he shuts off his BlackBerry and is ready to go to sleep. He's laying in the guest room bed, wearing shorts and a shirt, when Dylan Ward enters the room. Now, as nice as we know Robert is, he is going to be polite. You know, whatever Dylan has to say, some strange conversation that Dylan might want to have with him, he is going to entertain it to an extent, right? But always in a nice way. And as we know now, Dylan is a bit of a freak. And on this night, he was feeling a bit freaky about his house guest. Okay, now I could imagine Dylan proposing the two to have some fun, you know? Have you ever tried a man? How do you know you don't like it if you've never tried it? You know, some shit like that. What's in Dylan's pocket is the disturbing part in my scenario. And it is a syringe with xylazine, which I asked ChatGPT what would be the most likely drug to knock out someone in the Robert Wone case. And it's this one here. And it's a tranquilizer that could paralyze a person quickly for as much as 30 minutes up to 1 hour. Back to Robert in his bed, and Dylan Ward is now sitting at the foot of the bed. And suddenly, before Robert knew it, he felt a prick on his foot, which is where they found, you know, one of those syringe sites. Shortly after this, Robert loses all control of his body. And for good measure, Dylan injects him a couple of more times. Then out comes the toys. And he starts SAing a helpless Robert. And he uses his electrostimulation machine inside Robert's anus, his rectum. Google had to tell me the difference. I feel like I already know. Anus is the outside, rectum is the inside. Okay, this particular machine is designed to stimulate the prostate, which is inside your butt. And it literally has a milk mode in which the subject can involuntarily release semen, but without any sperm. Doesn't it all start to make sense here? So Dylan, he has a bunch of towels, okay, to catch the semen. Okay, he still wants to be a little bit clean about this because he is committing a crime, right? And so some of this semen lands on the bed sheets. It lands on Robert's abdomen, gets all over his own genitalia, of course. But Dylan was far from done. Okay, so he takes his electro device again, and now it was stained with some of Robert's semen. Now, if he did it on purpose or it just got on the machine. Well, he puts it back up Robert's behind and continues to electro pleasure Robert. Then the door opens again, and it's Joseph Price, surprised to see that Dylan started without him, because this was something that he had fantasized about for the longest time. After some more degeneracy, they realized that Robert was coming too. Okay, so they inject him with a little more xylazine to make sure he does not wake up and actually know what is happening to him. And after a while more, they realize that Robert is no longer breathing, because what the fuck does a massage therapist know about xylazine dosage? Xylazine, if given too much, the person could become completely rigid, right? The heart slows down to a snail's pace, in which even first responders can't even detect a pulse. And the victim's blood pressure, it drops, and the victim would have what is called the zombie stare. To Joseph and Dylan, it appears that Robert had died, and panic starts to set in. And that's when they come up with this plan to make it look like a murder, okay? Dylan rushes to the kitchen and grabs a thin knife from his set. With towels utilized to catch blood, I'd predict that it would be Joseph that stabs his friend Robert 3 times. And then they start the cleanup, okay? Blood still managed to pull underneath Robert. Nothing they could do about that. They carried Robert to the hallway bathroom. Robert is completely naked at this point because of, the SA BDSM stuff. And they shower him clean of the remaining blood. Dylan takes the knife and Robert's sleeping clothes, and those items would never be seen again. And soon he would be back to help dry and place Robert back into bed. Now, Joseph gets his own shorts and shirt, dresses up Robert, and there he will lie until help arrives. Joseph then frantically calls Victor to come and see what has happened. And once Victor sees what has happened, he panics and screams. And Joseph, thinking on the fly, is going to capitalize on Victor's genuine horror by telling him to call the police. Now that's what I think happened, okay? And here's also a little prediction on how this case is solved. And the key is Victor Zaborski, the one soul in this that I believe really has nothing to hide except that he got pulled into a fucked up situation. Now, whether they're still together or not, that's not something I could really find out. But I'll tell you, I do believe that they are. And this is why. So Joseph Price is the lawyer, the clear dominant personality in that house, in that relationship. Now, Joseph is not a faithful partner. Is that clear? If we're going by history, that's pretty clear. And Victor pretty much willingly accepted this arrangement without participating himself. So, dominant personality and a weak personality. So, if we can agree on that, I will pose this question, okay? Would the dominant personality allow the weak personality to leave the relationship if that weak personality pretty much knows that man's deepest, darkest secret? I'd say no. They'd probably rather kill that person than allow them to walk this earth free from their dominance. And that's also the reason why I do believe they are still together. Because if Victor Zaborski were ever to find himself free of Joseph, I think that Victor would eventually reveal what happened that night. So, in my scenario, Joseph has trapped Victor in a toxic relationship and will never let him go. Of course, Dylan is allowed to be free because he is just as culpable for Robert Wone's death as Joseph is, okay? Because self-preservation, right? That's a strong reason to just stay quiet and live out your remaining days. And that's the crazy Robert Wone case. And if you know of a more bizarre case, hey, please let me know. I would love to hear about it. I would love to do some research on it. But for now, just go on and protect the ones that you love. And don't you ever forget to love the ones that protect you.